In January, some people were angry at a small fish. The endangered delta smelt swims around in one of California's largest reservoirs. The amount of water that can be pumped out of the California Delta is limited to protect the fish, an issue highlighted during recent wildfires. Roger Stone went further, posting a picture of the rather boring-looking smelt with the caption, "This is the fish Gavin Newsome burned California down in order to save." With 130,000 people affected by the disaster, the search was on for a scapegoat. Unlike larger and deadlier fires in 2018 and 2020, the recent California wildfires affected the outskirts of a major city and destroyed homes owned by some of America's most influential and misinformed A-lister Hollywood stars. As the celebrities complained, President Biden rushed to the defense of the small fish, informing the public the water shortage was caused by a lack of power. The grid had been turned off to prevent loose wires starting more fires. Meanwhile, LA's female fire chief was criticized for her emphasis on diversity and inclusion. Her supporters highlighted over $17 million of cuts made by the mayor. "We have to resist any effort to pull us apart," argued Mayor Bass, as sources close to her briefed the media that the fire department budget had in fact been increased. Most critics had bigger fish to fry. California's Democrat governor was spending billions on inefficient homeless schemes as the fires raged, and apparently worrying about the delta smelt, a fish now under the political protection of the Democrat Party. But the lack of fresh water became less of an issue as the fire neared the coast and helicopters began dumping seawater on the flames. Finally, a suitable scapegoat emerged from the chaos, a homeless man accused of starting the fire. The police arrested him, and most parties could agree that was probably a good thing. The January 2025 wildfires were a disaster that triggered a political blame game. Along the way, the real story got lost. LA's table is set for disasters due to a lot of policies, reflected Professor Jeffrey Schlegelmilch. Southern California is dry and hilly. Hot desert winds sweep out to sea, reaching 100 kilometers an hour. 2024 was an extremely wet year in the state. Much more vegetation grew, which then dried out and offered fuel to the fires. On the outskirts of LA, small winding roads lead to celebrity mansions with lush gardens that also dry out. Some of these roads are inaccessible to fire trucks. Less affluent neighborhoods have also spread into the surrounding hills. Many of these houses are built with wood. These poor choices look even stranger when you realize the long-term problem of wildfires is nothing new in California. In 1542, Spanish explorer Juan Cabrillo sailed into an inlet he called the Bay of Smokes, modern-day Los Angeles. Like today, the desert winds were sweeping smoke out to sea. Some of these fires had been made to smoke fish. The area was a big trading hub, but the Tongva tribes also lit man-made wildfires to burn back thick vegetation. This prevented bigger fires from happening and made it easier to travel and hunt wild animals. In 1850, the US government forbid tribes from starting wildfires. Over the next 50 years, the number of native people fell from 150,000 to less than 16,000. The traditional practice of purposefully burning was banned, and then lost. The consequences followed. By 1889, California saw its first major wildfire, covering over 300,000 acres and cooking several thousand sheep. A drought and strong desert winds had created the perfect conditions. In response to this and similar fires, the government began to employ rangers to police the forests. The theory was that humans were mostly responsible for the wildfires, and if they could be stopped, then California's long, smoky history would be changed for the better. This total suppression policy wasn't perfect. In 1931, another massive fire burned through 200,000 acres just north of Los Angeles. At the same time, forests untouched by fire struggled. Invasive species flourished and crowded out the light. By the 1960s, the government had begun to worry about the lack of new sequoias. Cautiously, it began to relax its policies, allowing light wildfires in some areas. By the 2000s, a small group of tribal firelighters was being granted permission to burn the forests in Northern California. studies started to show the benefits of man-made wildfires. The burnt vegetation meant more water ran off into rivers. Knowing when the fire was going to happen made it easier to monitor. But overall, California still lags far behind other parts of America. In Florida, over 200 million acres are purposefully burnt each year. In contrast, Governor Newsom has reduced funding to forest services. Of 90,000 acres he claimed to have cleared of dead vegetation, only 12,000 were actually completed. Meanwhile, the size and ferocity of California's fires have begun to pick up. In 2018, the first fire to surpass the 1889 Santiago blaze was recorded. In 2020, an uncontrolled wildfire burned over 1 million acres. It's easy to lose sight of the big picture in the political point scoring. California's problem is much more than a story about a fish. It's a debate about how people interact with the natural world. Are politicians thinking about the environment as a reality they have to work with, or an enemy they must occasionally defeat? It's still possible to encounter a problem which can't be overcome by sheer force. This is an issue that needs long-term funding and careful planning. But which politician is going to tell you that? Hi, it's Arthur. Thanks for watching. If you like your news with a bit of historical context, why not subscribe to the channel? Who knows, I might even find the time to draw myself in a couple more poses like a real YouTuber.